everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'm delighted to introduce Michał Łuczewski tonight. The last time I saw Michał was in Warsaw in November of last year. I was there on All Saints' Day, and on All Saints' Day, everybody in Poland goes out to the cemeteries to visit their relatives, and so I went with Michał to visit his relatives in the cemetery. But the thing about Warsaw is that since everybody wants to go out of the city to visit the cemeteries, they have the roads blocked off so that you can't drive, you have to take public transportation. But this will tell you something about Michał. He had a friend who had a car who knew of a dirt path through the woods, and so we took this way and escaped Warsaw. It was very dramatic and very fun, and that's the way I think Michał operates. That's why he does what he does. He is the deputy director of the Center for the Thought of John Paul II in Warsaw, and assistant professor of the Institute of Sociology at the University of Warsaw. And he's been a visiting scholar at the Center for Social Studies in Warsaw. He's been to Columbia University in New York. He's going on from here to Purdue and Brown University and University of Notre Dame as well. So kind of making a tour of the United States. He's author of some very interesting publications, including his book, Eternal Nation, in which he studied this one particular Polish town over the course of 700 years, I think, kind of tracking changes between Catholicism and nationalism and so on. And he's here to not only speak to us tonight, but also to premiere the documentary that he's done on the Solidarity movement. So if you would please join me in welcoming Michał Łuczewski.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation. I'm really honored and grateful that I can be here. And I'm also grateful for the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology. And from one day experience in Chicago, I gathered that this is actually that Chicago itself is the center of world Catholicism and intercultural theology. We've been visiting two churches yesterday and today, and there was in both churches there was a beautiful icon of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and I felt as if at home there because this is my parish. My parish is devoted to Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And the lady I met today, she was a German, and she told me, we started speaking German, so she told me that she's delighted that I'm Polish, I'm here in her parish, and she said that there were three wonderful popes. John Paul II, who was a Pole, Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict XVI, who was a German, and now Francis. And that was that kind of intercultural theology, so there were many cultures but one theology. So I'm very grateful that I can be here in Chicago, the Center of World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology. What I would like to do today is to show you some insights from our book on Solidarity Step by Step, and also show you this final step we made, that is the documentary that was devoted to the experience of Solidarity. But let me start with World Catholicism once again. This is World Catholicism. This is Mary of Perpetual Help. I found her in the Polish church, Mother Mary of the Angels, and also in St. Michael's Church. That was a German church in downtown. And today I would like to speak with you about one concept that changed history. Because there are some concepts that are changing history. And the question is, what are those concepts? What are Christian concepts that can shape the course of the world, the course of history? This is Józef Tischner. He found such a word, and that word was solidarity. And he described that word, saying that history invents words so that they will later change history. And we have such words that change history. Our personal history, history of our nations, history of the world. And for sure, solidarity belongs to one of them. I mentioned that lady speaking about Pope Francis. And Pope Francis is a preacher of solidarity. I just went through newest messages during his visit to Cuba and the USA, and you can see in the press that he offers solidarity, he calls for solidarity, that he is, one could say, solidarity. And this is a strange thing for a pope to be, because solidarity is not a Christian concept initially. Solidarity had to be invented as a Christian concept, as a concept that is understood in a spiritual way. And here, this is a photo of Gdańsk shipyard. This is where Solidarność, Solidarity movement broke out 35 years ago. And as you see, those who read Polish can see at least that this is, there's a poster saying, "Long live and strengthen solidarity of our nation." And that was workers' movement. That was also to some, that was labor union. That was workers' movement. But it was done in the name of solidarity, nation. And you see two photos, two pictures there. One is Divine Mercy, and the other is also Mother of Perpetual Help. So it shows that Solidarność, solidarity became inextricably linked also with the calls of Polish workers 35 years ago, with the calls of labor union. That was the biggest labor union in 20th century, the biggest non-violent movement in 20th century. 10 million people protested against injustice that was taking place in Poland under the slogans of nation, religion, cross, divine mercy, the mother of Mary, Our Lady of Perpetual Help. But it is also unlikely that some anti-socialist, to some extent, movement preached solidarity. So let us start with a short history of the concept of solidarity. It was invented by Pierre Leroux, who imagined that word to replace another concept, Christian concept of love, of caritas. He said that caritas is not enough for revolution, and he wanted the revolution, so therefore he tried to replace caritas, love, with solidarity for two reasons. First, that for him love did not give justice to the question of self-interest. Revolution was about self-interest and interest of the poor, and caritas for him did not give justice to that drive. That is one point. And the second point is that for him caritas is not about equality, whereas for him equality is the guiding principle of the revolution. He was a communist, pre-Marxist communist, inventing that word, and it was more or less, it meant brotherhood, fraternity, fraternité in French. So that word became a part of a vocabulary of revolutionary movements in Europe, also of revisionist movement. Edward Bernstein, who was a Marxist revisionist at the beginning of the 20th century, he, in his book Arbeiterbewegung, so workers' movement, he also referred to the solidarity. And solidarity was one of the three principles next to freedom and equality that should guide the workers' movement. And therefore, because of these undertones that linked solidarity with the revolutionary movement, it was not welcomed by Catholic social teaching. Catholic social teaching was for a very long time skeptical of that word, and it's even more surprising than that now Francis and before John Paul II used that term. But let me summarize what that concept meant. It was a part of a revolutionary movement in Poland, that concept in Europe. That concept was a driver of revolution. It opened up a new space of future that should be mastered by humans. So such revolutionary concepts as solidarity, they break with the past. This is their first characteristic. So the past is not a master of our times. There are no lessons to be drawn from the past. We have to move to the future. And solidarity was that move to the future. It served people to understand what the future is all about, what is the goal that should be pursued. And it's called by Reinhard Koselleck, one of great German historians. The process is called temporalization. So the concepts become temporal. They refer to time. They are not metaphysical anymore. They just refer to time. They can be obtained, like kingdom of God. It can be realized within time. It's not to be realized somewhere in supernatural spheres. And this is also an abstract concept. And in modernity, there is a process of abstraction that concepts refer and can refer to many spheres. When we say solidarity, it's not just particular solidarity. Solidarity can be applied to many places in the world and to many times. So it's an abstract concept. It's not a concrete concept. And those concepts are linked with the isms. So in modernity, we start using isms, like communism, and this is Pierre Leroux, like socialism, like messianism, and these are very abstract concepts not known before. And there's a difference between republic, described by Aristotle, and republicanism. What's the difference? Republicanism is an abstraction. It shows you the goal to be obtained in the future. It breaks with the past. It is something to be realized in the future. And then the fourth characteristic of revolutionary concept is politicization. So they serve to mobilize masses. They serve for parties, to fuel parties. So politicization is also a very modern process. Masses are mobilized by words, like solidarity, like communism, like socialism, and so on and so forth. And the final characteristic of a modern word, revolutionary concept, is there is no alternative. So when people preach socialism or communism, there's no alternative. They know that this is the only goal to be realized. And to make a long story short, those five characteristics, they define what is a modern concept. They define the essence of modern concepts, and solidarity was imagined as one of the modern concepts. When you look at solidarity as used by Bernstein and Leroux, you see that you have a break with the past, you have temporalization, you have abstraction, you have politicization, and there's no alternative. People have to be in solidarity. There's the only path the history can follow. And now there's a huge jump to revolutionary reality. This is Poland of 70s. This is Poland that dreamt the dream of revolution. So that was our reality at that time. There was, as you see, break with the past. There's no reference here to the past. It's completely new. It's future-oriented, so we are building utopia, Bauhaus, utopia for many families. There's no alternative also for communism and for socialism in Poland. So those concepts that were invented in 19th century, they became reality. They became revolutionary reality of Poland in the 80s and 70s of the last century. But once they were realized, once those concepts were invented, modern concepts were invented and finally realized, there turned out to be that there's crisis. So you cannot realize those revolutionary concepts. Once you realize them, you see that there is crisis. And what, in rhetorical terms, modern revolutions dreamt about future in terms of comedy. So there will be a reconciliation in the future. There will be a glorious moment that will reconcile all dividing parties in future. But that comedy turned out to be tragedy, speaking in rhetorical terms. That future, that once it was realized, then people saw that there is no future for them once that future came out to be. Instead of experience of good, there was broader and deeper experience of evil. Instead of experience of freedom that was dreamt of by great socialists and communists of the past, there was experience of serfdom, and also experience of unreality. I like very much that experience that something is irreal or unreal, and when you look, it's for me it's like surreal image. That it's just incredible that people could be cramped in such a way. And in that moment, there's a place for prophetism. There's a place also for prophets who come and change the meaning of words. Okay. So people who see the crisis, they want to change the crisis, they want to overcome the crisis. And because the crisis was also an effect of new concepts that were introduced and realized, so the solution to the crisis is also based on inventing of concepts. And concepts that are to alleviate the crisis, to overcome the crisis, are concepts that come back to the past. So it's ressourcement. They come back to the sources. We are not to forget the past anymore. We have to come back to the past so that we can draw some lessons for us. Instead of temporalization of concepts, there's a process I would call spiritualization of concepts. So concepts become spiritual. They refer to the transcendent. They refer to religion. Before, for revolutions, religion was something to be abandoned, something to be overcome. But with crisis and with spiritualization of concepts that are to alleviate the crisis, religion and spirituality comes back. So we can, instead of revolution, of modern revolution, you can speak of revolution of the spirit. That was a very popular concept at the time. And instead of abstractions, instead of isms and communism, socialism, there is a drive to come back to the things, to be concrete, to get small things done, so to focus on something that is concrete. Instead of politicization, there's a process of anti-politicization, you could say, and there was a very widespread notion of anti-politics in the 70s and 90s and 80s in Eastern Europe, that we have to be anti-political, we have to overcome politicization, we have to come back to morality. And instead of speaking about politics, we are speaking about morality, that is to change politics, also to change economy. And instead, there's no alternative, there is freedom. So the answer to modern concepts that are changing the world along those 5 processes is come back to what was destroyed. So back to the past, history once again becomes magistra vita, back to the spirit, back to the concrete, anti-political, and stop thinking about that there are no alternatives. So there's a space of freedom. This is that was the structure of concepts that are anti-revolutionary or counter-revolutionary. And in the 70s in Poland, people were searching for such concepts that would just come back to the past. And people would speak about human fellowship, real human community, community of free people. These were concepts that were driving people's hearts. One of them was also Solidarność. And one of the first who used solidarity in a different way, in that spiritual way, in that counter-revolutionary way, was Karol Wojtyła. He did it in The Acting Person, and he defined solidarity in 1969 as an authentic attitude, as in contradistinction to evasion and conformism. And that was also an interesting move, and you can look at leaders, whether they can change the meaning of the words, because he was a future Pope, John Paul II, but he was a good professor of moral philosophy, and he used the communist word, the word that was revolutionary, in a different way, in a way that was counter-revolutionary, counter that reality that you've seen. And for me, great leaders are those who can invent such concepts, and they can change the meaning of concept, and then change the course of history. Also, the other famous philosopher from that time, Czech, Jan Patočka, you might not know him, but once you know Václav Havel, who wrote the famous essay, Power of the Powerless. So probably it's the most beautiful essay from that part of Europe, that the powerless, who are powerless vis-a-vis the state, do really have power to disobey. And he devoted that text to Jan Patočka, who was his fellow philosopher at one point, but also they were together fighting with the communist propaganda. And Patočka in the 70s, he introduced the concept of the solidarity of the shaken. So it's not that revolutionary solidarity, there's some new meaning to solidarity. Let me quote from Patočka. Solidarity of the shaken, a solidarity of those who are capable of understanding what life and death are all about, and so history is about. The solidarity of the shaken in their faith in the day, in life and peace. The solidarity of the shaken, which is built up in persecution and uncertainty. So this is a totally different image of solidarity than it was presented by Leroux and Bernstein. So those concepts like solidarity, like human fellowship, like human community, were searching also for reality to be changed. Reality sought for concepts, and also concepts sought reality to change it. And another huge jump, this is Victory Square, when Karol Wojtyła, that strange philosopher who changed the meaning of solidarity as an authentic attitude, came as John Paul II to Warsaw in 1979, and people could feel human fellowship, human community, and also they could feel solidarity. This is the way words are experienced, and that was for the first time that they could experience in such a scale. And he finished that homily on Victory Square. It was actually Victory Square of communism, but it turned out to be Victory Square of John Paul II, by saying, let the Spirit descend, let the Spirit descend, and renew the face of the earth, this earth. And you see how also new meanings are given to the experience, spiritualization. And by the way, I've seen in the Secret Service archives that communists were very wary what John Paul II is up to, that he is preaching some change, but they didn't understand what it means that let the Spirit descend. What kind of spirit and what kind of descent John Paul II had in mind. But then it turned out that the change was quite clear. This is Gdańsk shipyard after 1 year. This is Lech Wałęsa, who was the leader of Solidarity movement. And as you see on the gate of the Gdańsk shipyard, there was a photo of John Paul II. He was as if a defender of Gdańsk shipyard. Let me quote one short passage from Józef Tischner, you've seen on the very first slide. who was a priest who articulated the experience of solidarity. He wrote the beautiful book called The Ethics of Solidarity, or as translated into English as The Spirit of Solidarity. I happened to be in Rome in August 1980. I was having dinner with the Pope when Italian television broadcast pictures from Gdańsk. The gates of the striking shipyard workers, crowds of people, buckets stuffed between the railings of the shipyard fence. The camera zoomed in on the gate, and there, amidst the flowers, was a portrait of John Paul II. And this Pope was sitting next to me. He seemed withdrawn and did not speak. We all fell silent too. There was a widespread conviction that it was his fault. On the other hand, there was also a widespread hope that since his picture was there, a picture of the Pope, people wouldn't start killing each other. So it was an obvious link for everybody between the homily and the first pilgrimage in 1979 in Poland and the protest of workers. This is what it looked like. And the process that took place at that time was the process of counter-revolution, one would say, counter-modern revolution. That was revolution of the spirit. So it was coming back to the sources. So the past, the national past, became once more important. Also the religious past became once more important. There was also a widespread process of spiritualization of concepts. People from left and the right, they came back to the concept of conscience. For example, Józef Tischner defined solidarity as solidarity of consciences. So you have to distinguish between good and evil to understand reality. And to understand reality, as Józef Tischner claimed, you have to listen to the voice of God. So conscience became also a concept that was spiritual. Also ethos, widespread concept was ethos of solidarity. And ethos became a mobilizing concept. Dialogue became also spiritual dialogue in truth. And also forgiveness, our documentary is devoted to. It was also a spiritual forgiveness with reference to God, dialogue with reference to God, ethos with reference to God, and conscience with reference to God. So instead of temporalization of concepts, you have spiritualization of concepts, a deeper meaning that was bestowed on concepts. And also against that abstraction, there was coming back to being concrete. So people of Solidarity movement that didn't want to invent new ideologies. They just wanted to have their things done. Small things. They felt solidarity. They felt solidarity in their bones. It was not something abstract. That was something that could be experienced and lived. They created 21 demands. That was their main document. And in that document, next to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, great slogans, you had also very detailed demands, like increase of salary 2,000 zlotys, like kindergartens, like mass in public media. So these were like letting out free prisoners from prisons. So these were very concrete demands, not some abstract ideologies. And also anti-politics. They didn't want politics to come back, they wanted anti-politics. So they came back to virtues. They started speaking about courage, about wisdom, about love, about faith, about hope. These were new vocabulary was introduced, and that virtues should be introduced then to politics and to economy. So they changed the meaning, they changed the vision of the political. They also introduced the concept of witness you have to be witness to change reality, you have to witness the truth, and you have to be courageous to witness the truth, to the extent that you become a martyr. So instead of politics, they wanted anti-politics, that is changing the core, the meaning of politics. Virtues, witness, and martyrdom. And last but not least, they discovered freedom. That they discovered that they are agents, actors, and the life is not comedy, it's not tragedy, it's a drama. It's a drama between good and evil, and we have to choose in the right way. So let me once again come back to that image, and to the very place in Gdańsk, Zaspa, in 1987 came John Paul II. I told that in times of crisis there's a place for prophets. So this is his way. He preached, and then he said at that place that there is no solidarity without love. And then in that way he also changed the meaning of solidarity to reflect that counter-revolution. That was a spiritual concept that was also connected with virtue of love. That was a concept that is concrete, not political, it's not abstract, it's anti-political, and so on and so forth. So he introduced the notion of solidarity that reflected that move, that counter-revolutionary move, counter-revolution, just as Pierre Leroux wanted to replace solidarity, to replace love with solidarity, so John Paul II connected those concepts once again. And this is what the altar looked like. And as you see, he changed that emptiness into fullness, one could say. This is my favorite picture because it shows this is the same place I showed you before. It shows that the city that was empty, that was changed by the revolution, became a church, and the walls of the skyscrapers became walls of the church. For me, this is an incredible move and incredible change of meaning that took place at that time. And in 1987, John Paul II also came to the States. In Detroit, he called on solidarity. He said that solidarity is a consequence of our faith. So this is spiritualization of the concept. And also, this is also coming back to the roots. So solidarity is coming back to the roots. It's not something to be, we don't have to break with the past. We have to come back to the roots to realize solidarity. This is also national vocation. He said to Americans that solidarity should be pursued by Americans. So there's also that reference to human community. He also says that there is a need for world conscience. Speaking of world Catholicism, he spoke that there's a need for world conscience, and he combined solidarity with conscience once again. So once again, the concept that is spiritualized. He spoke about new solidarity, so solidarity that will take place in future, but it has to start now. It has to be realized here and now in the world that is neither comedy nor tragedy, but this is a drama between good and evil that we are torn, and we have to now choose here and now solidarity. And that solidarity will be without frontiers, and solidarity will be worldwide. In short, that it will be a global solidarity. So in those, within one would say 20 years, solidarity from a concept that did not exist in Catholic social teaching. It was in Mater Magistra. It was only mentioned twice, but by John 23rd. But it didn't have any resonance. And it's only John Paul II, with the experience of solidarity, of Solidarność in the 1980s, with the experience of one would say revolutions of the spirit of Central Eastern Europe, could come back to solidarity But to come back to solidarity, he had to change the meaning of solidarity. He had to present that solidarity in a new light as a counter-revolutionary concept that mobilizes people, that comes back to the past, that is spiritual, that gives you freedom, that gives you strength. So this is how that concept became global, and it mobilized on a mass scale society in Poland, but also in Central Eastern Europe. It posed a challenge for communism and the Soviet Union, and then under the challenge, finally the communism collapsed. And also, there was the concept that was globalized. And for us, the task is to globalize that concept, but to globalize that concept, we have to deepen its meaning first. And just finishing the part of my presentation, I would like to invite you to come back from the globalization of solidarity to once again to concrete experience of solidarity, and to the question, what are consequences of solidarity nowadays? So now I will show you half an hour of our documentary film that is devoted to solidarity, that is devoted to experience, and we also used film to convey the meaning of solidarity, because one can speak much about solidarity, but these are just words. And if we want to convey the experience and the spirituality of solidarity, we cannot confine ourselves to words. And I hope that that film will give you the flesh of what I wanted to say. So this much for words, now images that can convey the meaning of drama.
Thank you for being here today. My question is the status of solidarity today among young people. I remember seeing a film from 2006. I'm afraid I don't remember the name of it, but there were several young people who were unemployed and very disillusioned with solidarity. One of them had a father who had been in the movement, and I'm interested to know what the status is today, since this took us mainly to the 90s, I guess. Yeah.
So we will collect more questions?
No, go ahead and respond, and then we'll...
Okay. So as you saw, that solidarity after 1989, as a workers' movement, it was actually destroyed. There's that scene when he's describing his place of work, and he says it's completely emptiness, and he says that here there was entry and there were 600 people there. So actually people who stood behind solidarity, they were also the first victims of the new regime after 1989. So once liberal reforms were introduced, they were just made redundant. And the status of solidarity nowadays for young people, this is actually the question. I'm still relatively young, and this is the question for me and also to Piotr, who participated in that project. But for me, that was a discovery of such people, and also discovery that nobody thanked them for what they did. And we were asked, why you are approaching us after 25 years? Why we are on the margins? So this is, I would say that solidarity was forgotten by Poles themselves. It was also forgotten, I would say, well, maybe not in Ukraine, but in many parts of the world, because it was too much for us. Then we just started our own things, our own careers, our own individual patterns. So it was forgotten. But once you come back to that experience, you see that it can enriches you, and also the point of my talk that they used really spiritual language. And when the guy who spied on his friends says about forgiveness, he also always refers to God. And then you've seen it all over again, that we didn't make it up. It was just a natural way of speaking for them, just to refer everything to the spiritual, and we lost to some extent that spiritual, religious treasure of Solidarność.
Just a historical question. The French philosopher that you started out with, he died in 1871. Was it of old age, or was he communard, and was he executed in Paris? Just
No. It's old age.
Oh.
I'm wondering what were some of the elements of the crisis point, that motivated people to start Solidarity. I know it started with workers, but like, what were some of the things they were experiencing concretely that motivated them in this crisis phase, after revolution? And then, would any of this have happened without Karol Wojtyła becoming Pope?
Well, this is a very hard question. What people are motivated by, because we cannot explain our actions; they are unclear to us. And this is something that there's one saying of one of our interviewees. She said that nobody was great, but there was a flow of greatness. We were participating. So there was something bigger than they, and then everybody was participating in that. But what was motivation? Motivation was material, because there was the work was without any meaning, and Józef Tischner described that there was work for everybody, but it was without any meaning. So it didn't bring up the common good. But they also say, I could find it in our book, but they say that actually their material protest had to be also a spiritual protest. So it was also in the name of justice, in the name of truth, in the name of dignity. So it's hard to describe it separately. So it was workers' movement, for sure, it was class movement, but it was, there was self-interest there. But it was combined with the common good and with dignity, with religious and national slogans. And without Karol Wojtyła, it's hard to imagine that, because he the way they mobilized, they got to know the way of mobilization from Karol Wojtyła, because when he came to Poland in 1979, he just prayed and had masses at our cities, turning our cities into churches, and this is what they did. They had mass every day. They in a massive way they went to confession. There are beautiful photos in our book of lines of workers who have many sins for sure, but they go to confession. There were like cars with the poster "Pastoral Care," and the car was going to the shipyard. Two priests were jumping off, and they started confessing people. So the pastoral care. And what I find marvelous about Solidarity is that material motives and spiritual motives they combine to one whole. And without Wojtyła, I think it wouldn't be possible, and also it would probably be much more violent, because well, let me read one passage from Józef Tischner. When we heard Christian values, the heart became animated. Men regained a feeling of dignity. Long ago, before there was a Polish Pope, there were such times, yes, there were. We had only Father Kolben. We heard what he did, and each of us felt, this is it. Then Cardinal Wyszyński was in prison. Then we also felt, this is it. And then there was the Pope, who came to us and lay down on the runway and kissed the tormented Polish ground. And everyone discovered, this is it. Soon afterwards, there were strikes, and the portrait of the Pope hung on the gates of the Gdańsk shipyard. And inside the shipyard, there was Holy Mass, and people went to confession, and then received the body of Christ. because they did not know whether they might not be blown up in an hour, like those on Westerplatte years before. Nevertheless, they knew one thing: no violence was allowed. So they did not even smash the window panes. And the whole world opened its eyes in amazement because it discovered that this is it. Then came martial law. There were the events in the Wujek coal mine. It was whispered then, and later repeated, that the miners captured someone who had shot at them. And they did not hang him. They set him free because there had been a holy mass there in the morning. And they had been at the Lord's table. So how could they? And that was it. And somewhere towards the end of this whole story, Father Jerzy Popiełuszko, who said, "Overcome evil with good," we know what happened to him. But there was no retaliation because the solidarity of the time understood what is what. So this is a very good description also of the non-violent and spiritual nature of solidarity. Piotr, yes? Okay. So Piotr Czekierna, we wrote together a book on solidarity step by step, and if you are interested in that, we can send it to you. We have free PDF copies.
Thank you very much. And I just would like to share two reflections after seeing the film again and being here in America also since yesterday. So I was wondering why Polish solidarity movement finished with big success. Okay, this is the question. I think that was big success without violence, and we became free society again. So I think one of the possible question is that wasn't a false solidarity. False solidarity. It was real solidarity, and one of the main idea of real solidarity is based on truth. Based on truth. And this is not easy thing because you have to define what is wrong and what is right, who's good and who's bad. And I think if you would like to define it, it's pretty hard. You have to have good criteria, very good criteria, objective criteria. And for the solidarity movement, it was Christianity, of course, and especially the teaching of John Paul II. And the reflection that came to me, seeing what happened in our world, Poland, European Union, and America, I think today I think it's maybe controversial a bit that we have many examples of solidarity which is maybe false because the truth is not in the point. The truth, how things really are, how things really are. And I think the special area of that is human life or family model, etc. So this is my reflection that I would like to share with you and encourage us ourselves to seek for a solidarity with a truth at the point, and magnanimity is, I think, the other point. So thanks.
Any more questions from young fellows? I've seen you wanted to ask a question, yeah? By the...
No, I'm good. He actually asked my question.
Will I qualify as a young fellow? Just one quick question, which is probably a complicated one, but those things that you talked about which characterize communism, like temporalization and abstraction, which ones of those things apply to capitalism too?
I think all of them. That liberalism and capitalism, these are abstractions, and temporalization that you can realize the dreamed project here and now, break with the past. So the constant revolution. There is no alternative. So I think that at least in Poland, that capitalist liberal model had very many characteristics of what was combated before by Solidarity. And I would say that Solidarity fought against communism, and it was not strong enough to invent some new economic order, and it fell prey to order, that economic order for which there's no alternative, that breaks up with the past. So religion is not important anymore, workers are not important anymore, national history is not important anymore. Abstract rules you don't understand, but you know, out of a sudden, like 600 people are not there. They don't have work. So I think that this also, that our film and our book is not only about socialism and communism, but it's also about what happened with Solidarity, and that Solidarity was destroyed by martial law first, by the communism, but even after 1989 by the neoliberal capitalist reforms. So of course it's better to live, and I can say it from my experience, it's better to live under capitalism than under socialism and communism. But I think that the pattern is very similar. So I like very much that analysis of our world that draws on rhetorical concepts. So for capitalism, life is a comedy. It's just, you know, it will be reconciled somehow. For Gnostics, life is a tragedy, and for Christians, it's drama. So there's always space of freedom. As Piotr said, that there's always distinction between good and evil, and we are torn apart, good and evil. For capitalism and socialism, there is only one way, and there's no good and evil. There's only one good way. Any more questions from young fellows?
Before I ask you to join me in thanking Michał one more time, I just want to make a plug for some of the other events that the center has coming up. Please grab one of these on your way out. Next week we have a sister from India who's going to come and talk about her work with underprivileged people in India, and especially young women who are subject to caste discrimination. We have a series coming up of Muslim-Christian dialogues from different parts of the world, Muslim-Catholic dialogues from different parts of the world. And we have, next week on Wednesday, we're co-sponsoring an event on St. Junipero Serra, who's going to be canonized by the Pope here to some controversy as well. So lots of good things going on, so please do join us. Thank you for coming tonight, and please join me in thanking one more time, Michał.
So once again, thanks for your presence, and if you are interested in our book, then you have to write me an email. You have to Google my Google Gmail account, and then I will send it to you. Thanks a lot. And maybe you want to visit Warsaw for World Youth Day, and then we will see, because we are co-organizing it in Warsaw. Thanks a lot.